Welcome to the Raj and Drew Show for Entrepreneurs. I'm excited about the topics we are discussing today. We're going to talk about growth as a process in your business. And business growth, it's an essential process for a business to succeed. But how do we do that in an incremental, intentional way? And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we jump into growth as a process, Raj, I really want to ask you, and I think it's important for us to talk about why we must change. You talk about change or die is something that a concept or an idea that you talk a lot about. Tell me about this idea of change or die. Where does this come from?
So one of the biggest things I want people to understand is an entrepreneur life, a business always keeps on changing and evolving. In order for that, you need to have a real mindset. And that is where the change or die has come from. Because you see a lot of companies failing within the first 5 years. Over 80% fail within the first 5 years. The reason being is they started off well, but they're stuck and they stopped changing. Mm-hmm. And one of the sayings which I really, really like from the 18th century scientist Charles Darwin. One of the things he said is, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And that is what it is. So if you look at it, even from prehistoric times, you had the dinosaurs and everything else.
Yeah.
But if you look at today, only the human being survived all these millions of years.
Yeah.
And that is reason because we were flexible enough and we responded to the changes that were happening across. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the 20% of the companies, the small businesses that survive, thrive, and grow, there you will notice that they keep on changing and learning and growing.
Yeah.
And that is where it is very, very important that change or die come into picture.
So let me kind of maybe play the devil's advocate. Some may say the devil doesn't need an advocate, but I went into a restaurant. I'm working on this app idea. I went into a restaurant the other day. I was talking to one of the managers and I said, hey, I've got this app idea, this, that, and the other. Do you all think you'd be interested? And he said, I'll tell you the truth. He said, the owner is very rigid on the fact that they want to do things. This is a 97-year-old restaurant, and they want to do things the way they've always done it. And so what do you do? I mean, what do you do with these companies that are 97 years old, 100 years old nearly, and they say, hey, it's kind of the idea, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What do you say to those companies? Are those just outliers, or is there legitimacy to that mindset?
So if you go back and look at it, I look at it from two different angles. One, they're either leaving a lot of money on the table. They're very happy with what they're doing and they don't want to change. The second aspect of it is, if there is a major turbulence or something that comes, there is a potential that they can be wiped out. So you're always having that piece of it. And I'll give you a big example, General Electric, because I talk about that because that's the company I work with. They have been there on the stock exchange for since 1897 or something, over 125 years.
Yeah, wow.
But if you really look at it, what happened is they have built and did a lot of things. They changed a lot of it. But in the last 15 years, they are nowhere close to what they used to be. There are 5 different businesses. Some of the businesses have been sold. Some of the businesses have been shut down. Even after 125 years, there has been so much of change that is happening because they have not changed fast enough.
Okay.
So until 2001, they were changing fast enough, keep up. That is where the value was because Jack Welch pushed for that. Mm-hmm. But if you look at 2001, after the September 11th and everything else, the new management team had a different philosophy.
Okay.
They might have spoken about change, but they might have not implemented the change.
Yeah.
And today, the GE company is very different than what it is even 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Okay.
So that's a great example from a business perspective and from anything else. So your restaurant example is a great example. Mm-hmm. So again, if they're going, let us say they're making $1 million, just as an example.
Yeah.
So if they go back and change, they can make it 1.5, or they can go back and serve a lot more customers.
Yeah.
But they have come to a plateau, and that is where I call an entrepreneur becoming a small business owner, and they're in a maintenance mode.
Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha. So they're in a maintenance mode. Yeah.
And those things basically, unless something big happens, nothing is going to happen.
Okay.
So if you're saying they're from 97 years old, it is the first and the second generation have been running it. I'm assuming the second generation is running it, and they're also pretty much close to handing it over to the third generation.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yes. So if you look at the third generation, they may look at it very differently.
Mm-hmm.
Because the world has changed significantly.
Yeah.
So with that, a lot of other things have changed. So you cannot stay in the same way and expect to thrive. Maybe you can survive, and they are surviving. If they have not survived, they could not be here for 97 years.
Yeah.
But they might be leaving a lot of money on the table, or the opportunity to serve a lot of people is lost.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I get it. So, so what else? Because this comes from a training that you do. So when you talk about this concept, it's an entire module of change or die. What other aspects or what can kind of help us make that shift of changing or dying as an organization?
So there are three critical aspects of it. If you look at any organization, one is people, which I just call it the people transformation piece of it. Mm-hmm. The second is the strategy transformation piece of it. It is all about strategy. And the third is the process side of it.
Yeah.
So depending on which phase of the growth you are and stuff, one becomes more prominent than the other ones.
Yeah.
So if you look at 1 and 2, basically all of your vision and strategy is very, very important. If you don't have the guidance, then you don't have the willpower to go back and execute on that.
Okay.
And the founder has to really focus on that. And fast forward that, and now let us say they have been in business, they got 40, 50, 60 employees. Mm-hmm. Now, they're so big that they cannot rely just on strategy piece of it, but they really need the managers who have been there and done that and manage that. And they need to set up processes so that they can provide consistent product and service to the customer.
Okay.
So each phase of that growth, there is something that has to be changed.
Okay.
And that's the reason why in the change or die, one of the biggest thing I say is good leaders adapt and shift. That is the word I use.
So define those. I mean, I could give some definitions on my own, but when you think of adapting and shifting, what are, maybe even specifically, what are some of the moves that people have to make when they're going from, 10 employees and they're moving now, they're growing to 20 employees. What kind of adapting and shifting do they have to do?
So if you go back, that's a great example, 10 to 20 employees, right? When you're 10 employees, almost everybody is meeting everybody else, and communication becomes like, hey, you do this. Informal communication will be suffice, and that is enough.
Okay.
But now when you have 20 people, the business is bigger, and there are more people, the same thing would not be enough for them from a communication perspective. Now they need to adapt to the different functions and different leaders. Mm-hmm. So if the entrepreneur does not get two right hand, left hand kind of leaders working with him, then the communication starts breaking down.
Okay.
That is where they need to shift and saying, you know what, the CEO cannot communicate, or the entrepreneur cannot communicate with everybody else. But basically the managers also should be communicating, and the entrepreneur should be in sync with the two people. So delegation, communication becomes very critical. So adapting is now the new structure, the new people, I need to change my habits and adapt to that.
Okay.
And then I need to think and differently, act differently. Now I need to start delegating and hiring two leaders for myself.
Okay.
And the other example, I don't like the pandemic because it's gone, but if you look at the pandemic piece of it, a lot of people had to adapt and say, how can I go back and deliver my processes or my services or products without interacting with people? That's a huge adaptation model.
Yeah.
So everybody had to change.
Mm-hmm.
So my simple example is I'm very, very comfortable going back customer site, do 2 days, 3 days, 4 days workshops.
Yeah.
But in the pandemic, we could not travel. We could not do that. So I had to go back and use Zoom as my model. And that is where I train people. That's how I communicated with people. Mm-hmm. And now since things are coming back, now you have to change again and adapt to the hybrid model, because there are some people comfortable with Zoom. Some people still want to do it in person now since everything is okay.
Yeah.
So I had a shift in 2021. I had a shift in 23 again now. Some of it in 22 again. So always you need to go back and look at it from that perspective.
Be open. So it is really a mindset thing of always being open to changing, new ideas, fresh outlook, a different way of approaching even your hiring process. I was talking to a client earlier this afternoon, and they're looking at some outside leadership roles, and I gave them some suggestions on things they could do for a second interview and to challenge the people and to figure out if they have what it takes to fulfill this role. And the person I was talking to very openly admitted, I didn't really like what you were saying when you first said it, but I see the value now in that you've explained it. And that's the difference, right? Now they're at about 50 employees. They want to grow to 100. And so they have this idea they want to grow, and they understand if we're going to expand our team, we have to be looking at different ways of doing things so that we can get a different result, right? If you're not getting the results you want, then you've got to change and modify your approach. I love the pandemic example, because we all had to do it, or we didn't. And there's a lot of restaurants in particular that said, we don't do delivery. We're not going to do delivery. We're going to wait this thing out. And you couldn't wait it out. You couldn't wait long enough. So adapting, and there's all kinds of things that come along. We were talking about before we jumped on for this recording about the different AI products out there. Now you can be resistant to those products, and you can say, I don't like that. I think that's cheating using AI, whatever. Okay, but the reality is it's here. And the people that are going to excel, you're still going to need human management if you're writing content, but the people that are going to excel are going to be the ones that learn how to use the new tools and leverage them for the future opportunities. So I love that. Change or die. I think it's so valuable. I think there's an old story of when horse and buggies came out, and not when horse and buggies came out, when vehicles came out, and there was a horse and buggy company that came out with a new whip like the same year.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
You're stuck in the past, and you're going to die, because it's going to be a very small little niche group that want to still ride a horse and buggy when there's combustion engines. So okay, so change or die. Was there anything else you want to say about change or die before we really get into growth as a process? Because I know you have so much to say about really being intentional and putting together a timeline and a calendar of what that looks like. So if you're listening and I want you to get your pen and paper out, because there's going to be a lot of great information coming your way that is normally reserved for your clients, right, Raj? This is something you normally keep under wraps, but you've allowed to share it in the podcast today. So anything else on change or die before we jump into that growth as a process?
So one advice I would give to all the leaders or entrepreneurs is start at least by thinking and reflecting. If something is different, something is looking at it, always take the time to go back and think and reflect on that. And once you start thinking and reflecting on it, then you can start acting and saying, what do I need to change? And then make sure that you are a leader and you're leading in that direction and communicating with everybody. So that's what I said. You need to start shifting yourself, adapt and shift, and start with your thinking, then you're acting, and then you're leading.
Start with your thinking. That's good.
Because if you don't think, it's going to be a random action. You don't want to be involved with it.
And I wanted to go ahead.
No, basically, if you go back and really look at it, some of the details we have learned about the change or die piece of it, just to go back and give, there are always going to be like the 3% population who are visionaries. They're always, it comes so naturally to them that they're always thinking and acting and leading. And there are early adapters, almost like 13% of the population. These people are really thinking and asking a lot of questions before they act. These people want to change, but they want to make sure there is a right change. And they spend a lot of time thinking about it. So these are the people, generally, when you go back and look at successful companies, always pioneering things, you will find most of them in the early adapters. Because sometimes the visionaries might adapt, but they don't even know what they're adapting to, because they have only given a surface level. They are not really deeper. But the early adapters, the 13% of the population, they're really looking at it with a fine-tooth comb. And those are the people who will be most successful, because they're doing the whole thinking, acting, and leading, but they're doing it in a very, very sustained way and a logical way as well. And then we call them the next 34% are the early majority. They really want to change. They understand the change. They want to do it, but they really are a little bit scared of taking the first move. So they're waiting to see somebody else make the change, and then they will follow.
Okay.
And the late majority is the next 34%. And these are the people, they really don't want to change, but they're very, very keen observing everybody else and saying, hey, will this affect me adversely and stuff? And these are the people who change almost the last.
Okay. Kind of eventually they get there because they understand that it's important for them to change.
Exactly. And here comes the 16% of the population. These are the people, they not only want to change, they're very, very reserved, and basically they do anything and everything to stop from changing.
Okay.
And not only that, they try to go back and work with somebody else to go back and disturb them from changing.
So these are the horse and buggy people we were just talking about.
Exactly. These people don't change. They don't want others to change and stuff. So some people might survive, like the restaurant example here. They are kind of the laggards, but they have enough of those things saying that, you know what, I have enough profitability so I can sustain it.
Yeah.
But in that 16%, generally about 10% of the people become extinct. That is where you see the shops closing, the people closing and everything else.
Gotcha.
So always the bottom 10% of the rigid laggards, we call them, those are the people basically becoming extinct.
Okay. All right. Don't be part of that last 10% is the moral of the lesson there.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So let's jump into growth as a process. And when you think of processes, I think a definition or quick definition of a business process could be a structured activity to achieve an organizational goal. Does that work for you today?
That works perfectly well.
All right. So when we think of structured activities to achieve our goals in our business, what is this process that you have that you've been using for years, right? To help other businesses grow. You gave me a number. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head. This has been a while back. The number's probably grown, but you've helped in your career organizations grow revenues by, what was the number? Do you remember that?
So basically, overall, it was close to over $400 million.
That's
all the companies, all my customers. It should be close to about 418, 419. I don't have the latest numbers, but there should over 400, north of $400 million in financial benefit.
Amazing. That's fantastic. So bottom line, I wanted people to hear that because you know what you're talking about when you're talking about this growth for a business. You know, if someone wants to learn about how to use Chat GPT, maybe you're not the guy to ask, you know, but if they want to grow their business, but if you want to grow your business, you are the guy to ask. So tell us about growth as a process. Jump in. Let's get in the weeds. Let's talk about growth as a process.
So based on your definition, one of the key pieces of it is, what did your definition tell me? Repeat that one more time. I just want to make sure and relate that.
Yes, structured activities to achieve organizational goals.
Yeah. So the key part of it is structure and activities. So whenever you go back and have growth as a process, there are certain activities that you need to do throughout the year. And once you do that, and they are done in a formal way or a structured way, the first year is a great learning piece of it, but eventually it becomes such a nice process that will automatically help you to grow. So I'm going to take, and I don't want people to confuse growth as a process is coming more from a strategy perspective, not from an operational or a tactical perspective.
Okay.
So every business is very comfortable. They have the monthly meetings and say, how did I do my sales? Did I meet my goals or not, and everything else. That I call the tactical side of it.
Yes.
So this one, when I go back and say growth as a process, it is almost strategy piece of it.
Okay.
So before we get into the calendar and start with, I'm making certain assumptions here for ease of understanding that everybody knows what a strategy plan is, and they have a strategy plan they develop every year. So I just want to make that assumption. In the actual program, when we work with clients, we help them to develop the strategy plan and everything else. But here, I just want to make sure that the starting point is they already have a strategy plan in place.
Okay. So we're working with an organization that already has a strategic plan in place, and you maybe have some 1 year and some 3-year goals on that. And then we have our quarterly objectives, something to that effect. That's what we're bringing to the table. So if you don't have that, you can reach out to Raj. He can help you put that together, or his program, EGA can help you put that together. But that's something that conceptually, the example you're giving, an individual already has.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. So let's start from that starting point.
So I will go back and say, since we are in Feb, right, it is great to start with it. So every business, they had a strategy plan, they had the goals for 2022, and by now they know what they have done. They have the actual numbers and everything. So the first thing in this growth as a process, in January, what we do is we get all the department heads and functional heads, whoever the people are, the leadership team and stuff. They sit back and they do 2 very, very structured activities. One is structurally looking at the past 12 months, looking at their goals and saying, and they're doing a performance review. How well did we do against our goals for last year? It is not just saying, oh, I beat the goal by 5% or I didn't meet the goal. It is not that. They're really going in deep, trying to analyze the 12 months. And the biggest part of it is they will need to come up with 2 things. What are some of the things that worked out very well, like best practices? And what are the 2 or 3 things that really did not work very well? And those are lessons learned. So every year, January, they take the time. It takes them 4 hours to 8 hours, depending on the size of the company, size of the departments and stuff. But they are doing these 2 things: strategy execution review, strategy performance review. All the departments are doing it there. And then in February, all the leaders come together and start sharing the best practices. Communication is key. And the second part of it that they do in January is they look at the current year goals, because I told they already have a strategy plan, right? So they have to execute for the 23 goals, because that is what we're talking today. So in January, they go back and look at the goals and then do a thorough analysis and say, are there any risks in not meeting these goals? So sometimes you have technology issues. Sometimes you have people issues. Sometimes you have talent issues. Sometimes you have product issues. So you go back and really bring those to the surface and say, are there any execution risks? That is the second part. One is the performance review and one is the execution review. And as soon as we do the execution review, we identify maybe 2 or 3, depending on the company where they are, maybe 4 or 5 initiatives, say, you know what, these are the 5 risks. If we don't mitigate them, then the chance of we meeting the goals for this year are not there.
So in that process, are you doing like a SWOT analysis or something similar to that, kind of the weaknesses or the threats outside the organization?
So it is a modified SWOT analysis. But here, what we go back and look at it is this: the possibility of happening risk, the probability, right? Everything, there is a probability of happening. And the second part we look at it is the magnitude. If this happens, what is the effect on it? So we want to take the qualitative subject matter experts' thoughts and we want to put it into a quantitative framework so that it becomes, for prioritization, becomes very easy. So to give you an example, basically, if it is the probability risk, we go back and say 1 is low probability of happening versus 5 is a 90 to 95% chance of happening. Based on the subject matter experts, we can give any number between 1 and 5. And then the magnitude of the risk is 1, 2, and 3, low, medium, and high. So if somebody says it is very, very high, 5, and the impact is very high, then it becomes 3 times 5, 15. So that is a high priority the team needs to address. It is not Drew is telling this is important, Raj is telling important. There is moving that emotion piece away and putting it into a quantitative framework.
I like it.
And as soon as that comes, and anything that has a number 10 or above, between 10 and 15, immediately there should be a project charter. The project charter is identifying the goal, the problem, the team, and everybody else. And that becomes the cadence for them to execute. So a lot of people try to identify this and they put it on the shelf and they go about doing their jobs.
Mm.
So nothing changes. And then
never to be seen again until they dust it off in December to see if they achieved it.
Exactly. And
that's how you do strategic planning, right, Raj? And set goals.
And that was one of the biggest blunders people had in the past.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why every month you have some activity going on in the growth as a process.
Mm.
So in first quarter, it is all about understanding performance and understanding the risks from the current year.
Okay.
So January, you do the analysis functionally, then February, you come back, share it with everybody else, share with the other leaders. So everybody can learn from each other. And now the knowledge management piece is there.
Mm-hmm.
Now going to the second quarter. Remember, the strategy plan has a 1-year plan and a 3-year plan, right? So most of the companies, when they're small and stuff, they go with their gut feel and say, okay, we can do this, and they go through the 3-year and the 5-year plan.
Okay.
But if you really look at their plans, what you understand there is they're saying, hey, I'm in 3 states today, I want to be in 4 states or 5 states. So they're talking about organic growth with the same products and hoping that everything is the same.
And when you mention states, you're talking about the stage of growth that they're in as a company. And that's another concept that we'll talk about in a future podcast.
Yes.
But just so everybody listening can understand, there are 5 different stages of growth that a small company goes through, correct?
Yes, exactly. And the second part of it is when they're looking at their growth, right? Everybody wants to grow. There is no 2 ways about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when they look at the growth from a long-term perspective, they don't talk really about coming up with innovative products. They go back and say, hey, the products are running well. Today, I'm selling it in Texas. Tomorrow, I want to sell it in Tennessee. I want to sell it in California.
Okay.
So that is more of your organic growth. You're assuming that everything else is the same. That nobody else is going to be selling this product in California. Nobody's selling this product in Tennessee.
Okay.
But here, when you have growth as a process, you go back and look at it and say, where will the customers be 3 years from today?
Okay.
What technological changes are you doing? So you're making a lot of assumptions based on your research and everything else.
Yeah.
And you go through a filter of 5 to 7 different scenarios to really understand where will my customers be and how will they be reacting and what are the needs and wants.
Yeah.
And that is where you start brainstorming and identifying initiatives. So in the April month is almost doing the homework to understand what the customer's needs and wants are. And based on that, what do we need to do to get ready for that?
Okay. I like that. I like viewing it as not expansion, really just expanding our current product and offering to new areas or new regions, but instead yes, expansion, but innovation and trying to get in the mind of the consumer in the future, that's a great way to look at growth. What will they want in the future? What will they be thinking they want? I mean, you can think of Amazon and how, what will people want? They'll continue to want it faster. How can we do delivery in 2 hours on a product and different things like that?
Exactly. And now you see why the change or die is so important, because this will go back and say, hey guys, the customer is changing. You better follow through and you change your approach to that. Yeah. So every year in the month of April, you're thinking of change because you're understanding your customer needs and then seeing what it is. And you can even look at it and say, who are the new competitors coming into the field and how will it affect?
Yeah.
So a lot of the research happens.
Yeah, I'm curious, are there any maybe across the board consistent things that people always want? I'm thinking off the top of my head, people always want things faster. That's probably not going to change in our culture, at least in the United States. Speed, can you get it to me faster and cheaper is probably one of those things that people are always going to think. Are there any other how different companies execute on that is different, but what are there any other consistent ways to go about this innovation process or thinking that consistently people want over time?
Yeah, but Drew, I would go back and add one point here very critically is you want to focus on your ideal customer. Not everybody wants. See, you are talking about everybody wants speed. I agree with that, but I am not in the business of serving people fast.
I love that.
So I need to go back and really look at it. Who is my ideal client and what are their needs? It has to be segmented and you need to understand that. If you don't understand your client, this exercise becomes very, very difficult.
That's good.
So you understand your customer segment, what are their needs and wants, what are changing.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about, right? If you go back and look at the AI right now, the chat, GPT, CPT,
yeah,
that affects a lot of the writers. So if I am in the business of writing, if I'm in the business of publishing, I'm business in the right of marketing, I really need to go back and really look at it and say where and how it is going to affect me and what do I need to do and change and adapt here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are 13% of the people who are already changed 2 years ago in their approach because they see this coming, because there was so much of AI happening already.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and it's so much better now than it was
exactly.
2 years ago. We had conversations about it a couple of years ago, and I was, looking into it, and it was 50-50, the product that you got. Now, I just showed you before we jumped on, you can write a job description. You can ask AI products to write a job description for any job that you can think of, and it'll pull what's on the internet and put it together. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So that is the biggest part of it, that in the second quarter, what you do is basically go back and start identifying and research and say, what are some of the assumptions you are making? So you can go back and work on your assumptions and make some decisions, which will be too risky, or you can do some research. And what I work with my clients is I tell them, hire a couple of good MBA students, some MBA who have finished their bachelor's, got 3-4 years experience, and now they're going back and getting their MBA full time. So they know the work experience, they finished their first year, and they're looking for internships in the summer to enrich their learning.
Yeah.
I try to bring them on a 10-week, 12-week assignment.
Okay.
And these assumptions, what we have made, we define projects around that, and we give it to them so that they have a great experience working with the executive, but they're doing all the research and saying, okay, how will this affect the client? Can I do some discussion? Can I go back and talk to somebody? Whatever is required, they do that in the 6 to 8 weeks.
Nice.
And then they prepare a nice final presentation of whatever they have learned and found. They present it to the leadership team, and they go back to their second year of college. Two advantages there. Now I know the quality of their work. And if I'm looking for hiring somebody after the second year, I got somebody who has worked with me for 8 weeks. They know the projects and stuff. So immediately give them an offer to come back and join. So hiring a talented person is a great way of doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
And second, you got all the research, and you're getting all the intelligence from the colleges, the latest research they're doing, and they're practicing that with you. So you're getting a lot of outside knowledge into the company already.
Yeah.
And once you get into that piece of it, it becomes very, very important for you to evaluate all of those ideas.
Okay. So where are we at? Remind me, catch me up. So we're in second quarter.
Yes.
What month are we in?
We are into June and July.
June. Okay. So June, and then we're moving into third quarter here. Okay.
Yeah. So by the end of June, they go back and give you the results and presentations, and the interns live it because they got to go back to their colleges, right? In August.
Yes, absolutely.
And stuff. And one thing I always recommend in the month of July, the project work and planning is happening, but I always go back and recommend my leadership team in July to look at their whole org structure.
Okay.
Do we have so you were mentioning about SWOT analysis?
Yeah.
This is a great place from a people perspective. I'll go back and say, okay, we are aiming for 25% growth in the next 3 years. Do we have the right talent? Do we have the right people in the right places? Are my people, have they maxed out with their learning, or there is a capacity to go back and move them? Do we need to bring in some new blood? Do we need to bring in some experienced blood?
Yeah.
All of that is happening in July so that you start planning for that.
Okay.
So July is all about people.
I like it.
And then in the month of August, we have the first draft, all the projects, all the reviews, and the leadership sees to say, you know what, we went through these 5 projects. This one project is sure very, very good. Let us put it part of the plan, and we launch it in the next fiscal year. These 2 projects, you know what, they're very good, but they cannot be feasible for until 2 years ago. So let us put some budget to do the groundwork and develop the foundational skills.
Okay.
And the other 2 projects, you know what, they're not ready for the market. The feedback was not there. Let us put it on hold and see at a future date.
Okay.
All of that is happening in August. And now in September, now you have the information for your 3-year plan. What does it give you from the research side? You're looking at your operating plan, what you have done so far in the last 9 months. And now you go back and start building your budget and your plan for the next year. So this is where I said September is the month where you develop your 1-year goals and 3-year goals.
Okay.
So in September, you have your 1-year strategy for the next year. You pretty much have the 3-year plans and goals all revised and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And then October is when you go back and say, do I have the budget for everything that we are planning for?
Okay.
And October is all about financial planning and everything else. And November, you'll have the final review, signed, sealed, everything else, and then it is communicated to the leadership. Everybody knows what is expected from everybody else in the next 12 months and next 36 months.
Okay.
And in December, basically, everybody's comfortable, the evaluations are done, everything is done. And then again, January comes, the same.
We start all over.
All over again. So now that is the process I talk about. What were you talking about? Structured activities. These are the structured activities. Each one of it is structured. Each one has a certain system to go back and work with it. And throughout the year, they're never taking their focus off the strategy side.
So this is the structured process that you teach in your EGA program, your Entrepreneur Growth Alliance program, that you lead organizations through kind of in a cohort format.
Yes.
So this process has enabled you to help multiple small businesses increase revenues, a total in your career over $418 million over your career period. So what, as you think about this process, I'm curious, how long does it take the average organization to really adopt this process and have it become a part of their normal operating system?
So if you go back and look at it, there are two ways. Some people go back and say, Raj, come in, spend 3 days, 4 days, teach us this, and we will implement that.
Okay.
So for those people, it has taken at least 2 cycles, 2 years to really get a handle on that.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you and be candid here, there are some companies, they stopped using it because they could not figure it out. They lost traction, they lost everything else, and they did not do it and they stopped using it. I do have those examples as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain companies, they stay with us for 6 months or 12 months.
Yeah.
They go back and say, Raj, help us with the first 12 months of implementation.
Mm-hmm.
So every month I'm there with them, helping them to do things. Like SCR, SPR, I work with them in the month of January and February. Then basically in the month of April and May, we are brainstorming ideas, creating project charters, reviewing those things, talking to the students, bringing the MBA. I'm involved all of this process throughout the year.
Yeah.
So for them, the second year has become very, very comfortable. First year, they're very comfortable because they have somebody there hand holding and helping them to walk through everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is a lot of 2 things here. A lot of adaptation from an old system to a new system.
Mm-hmm.
And there is going to be a difference in the mindset.
Yeah.
So both of those things are really, really difficult for human beings. So you need some external accountability partner to really work with you, help you answer the questions. And that is the accountability partner and the expertise we provide.
Yeah. So is this just for companies that have 50 or more employees, or kind of who can benefit from this program? I know you work with different size companies, but maybe specifically the Entrepreneur Growth Alliance program, what is that designed for?
So the Entrepreneur Growth Alliance, I have done a lot of research. My sweet spot to really work with them and help them is when employees have like 11, 12 employees, all the way to about 60, 65 employees.
Okay.
So once you go beyond the 60, 65 employees, they don't need to be in a cohort. We will go back and take it and do it only for their company exclusive.
Gotcha. So as they grow into that size, or if they're already 70 employees, then we need to go ahead and just work with your team because you have, like we said, the growth stages. I don't think we said it in this podcast. We've said it in others, but the stages of growth are not revenue determined, they're people determined. And so the more people you have, the more complicated your business becomes.
Yes.
So when you hit that 70 point, you need to have a focused effort just with your organization meeting together. Whereas if you're smaller, you can, for one, the budget is smaller. And so you can spread out that cost of your time by getting multiple smaller companies together, and they can get tremendous benefit out of it, working in a cohort in that way.
Yes, that's how it is basically. This EGA program is all built for the cohort base so they can learn best practices from each other.
Okay.
And basically, it'll be a much more economically beneficial for the smaller businesses because they have smaller volumes.
Perfect. Perfect. Wow. So that was a lot. I think people are going to probably have to listen to that podcast 2 or 3 times to take some notes and to make sure that looking through it every month, Raj gave you a different item to focus on. And you can take some notes from this program, or you can just go to vrt9.com/EGA, and you can join the next cohort and get all the information and the handouts and everything explained to you and walk through if you want to join his program. But with that, do you have any parting words you want to say to our listeners before we go today, Raj?
So one of the things I want to say is, because this is a podcast, we are going to go back and put up a blog with that so people can read it and get a little more insight as well. So they just can go to vrt9.com/blog and look for this growth as a process. And they will have that so they can at least print it out or read there and get a little more additional insights.
Perfect. Perfect. So, wow, even more free content, Raj. This is your generosity. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for doing that for the listeners. So vrt9.com is going to be your home for information around the topics that we're discussing, whether it's blog posts, there's other blog posts that are already uploaded, resources on the website, contact information for Raj. And with that, thank you so much for listening. Raj, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise with us today. And this is the first in a series talking about growth as a process and the many factors that go into that process. So I'm looking forward to seeing the listeners on the next one.
Sure, Drew. Thank you very much.
If you would like to find out more about how to implement growth as a process in your business, I want to highly recommend the Entrepreneur Growth Alliance program. And you can find out about this program and more at vrt9.com/EGA.